using the era of big government. Congress has many tools at its disposal to take care of vital responsibilities. Will save the American taxpayers $9 billion. In order, federal agencies cut billions of dollars in administrative costs and become 100,000 federal positions. They estimate that reducing the federal workforce by 10% would allow cut red tape, streamline the bureaucracy, change procurement rules, change the personnel rules, and create a government that works better and costs less. We'll consolidate departments. We'll get rid of duplicate departments. We'll allow competition to bring about better service at lower costs. We can downsize government by 12%, reducing the bureaucracy by 252,000 positions.
Everyone knows that getting rid of the deficit will require some tough decisions. And that includes cutting back on billions of dollars in programs that a lot of people care about. But what should be easy is getting rid of the pointless waste and stupid spending that doesn't benefit anybody. You're paying for thousands of buildings all across the country, and no one uses it. Now, the government hasn't been able to sell this building and others like it because of red tape.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Burton for his opening statement.
My interest is to try to root out waste, large and small, in a systematic way. And in September, you'll convene the cabinet.
Mr. Burton, can you turn that thing on? And make sure when you talk, your microphone is closed.
We need to step up our game. We need to go after everything. We need to make government work for you. That's why I'm starting today. I've asked the Vice President to lead a renewed effort to hunt down misspent tax dollars over every agency and department of this government. We're not just eliminating fraud and waste. We hope to be instilling an entirely new culture that not only our administration, but every succeeding administration will in fact pursue. For that, you have the government you expect to deserve.
I certainly wish that my Democrat colleagues felt the same as their former Democrat leaders felt and worked to try to reduce our deficit and reduce the size of our government. Unfortunately, these former Democrat leaders failed at what they were saying they were trying to do. But today's DOGE and DOGE subcommittee is actually delivering on those exact promises, and we are delivering the results. It's too bad that my Democrat colleagues constantly mock DOGE, attack DOGE, criticize DOGE, and criticize the hardworking people in DOGE. They also attack this committee and attack what we're all about. But that's today's Democrat Party. They're for big government, big spending, and doing nothing for the American people. They're America last. This subcommittee has highlighted where DOGE has staunched the flow of waste, fraud, and abuse in federal spending. DOGE drove the administration to turn off the spending faucet that was pouring out billions of dollars to corrupt anti-American NGOs, to illegal DEI programs, and to a vast array of wasteful, unnecessary federal grants, contracts, leases, and personnel. President Trump drove this massive effort by creating DOGE via executive order on Inauguration Day. He then issued a series of White House directives empowering DOGE teams to work with agency leaders government-wide in an unprecedented effort to root out wasteful spending using all means at their disposal. And that effort has borne fruit. The DOGE website identifies $180 billion in savings achieved in just a matter of months. We need to make sure we lock in those savings. It should be the first installment we pay on our nation's $37 trillion debt. We need to tackle that debt on behalf of our children and future generations. That's why Congress needs to act. DOGE has shown how our government can cost less and deliver more. It's shown how we can turn off the faucet. It's shown we don't need to spend all the dollars that Congress appropriated for this year. Congress can reverse that unnecessary spending by rescinding dollars it's appropriated. That's why the administration recently sent a $9 billion rescission request to Congress. By the way, you just saw Democrats on that video talking about saving $9 billion. Republicans just delivered on that. It would prevent dollars. Our $9 billion rescission would prevent dollars from going to corrupt international organizations, to woke NGOs, to NPR, and to PBS. The House adopted the legislation earlier this month, H.R. 4, the Rescission Act of 2025. But we need to do more, much more. $9 billion is just the tip of the iceberg of the waste that DOGE has identified, and of the spending that the administration has paused or shut off. So Congress needs to work with the administration and DOGE to rescind billions more of dollars it has appropriated for agencies to spend. DOGE is also creating savings that will lower the cost of government for years to come. For instance, the administration is right-sizing the federal bureaucracy by eliminating several 100,000 staff positions. That reduces discretionary spending costs for the next year and every future year by tens of billions of dollars. So we need to adjust those levels of new appropriations to align with the streamlined government DOGE is creating. That's why the President proposed last month, when he submitted to Congress a budget for next year that reduces non-discretionary spending by $163 billion. If we lower the spending baseline in that way, we can save $2 trillion in that portion of the budget over the coming decade. We need to lock in DOGE savings for the taxpayers, and we should also be thinking about locking in the DOGE process that has produced these savings. DOGE has attracted enemies because it's taken on Washington's culture of spending and the money laundering schemes that have been embedded in this institution. We should make that a permanent battle. We should institutionalize the battle against waste, fraud, and abuse in government. I hope that is something with which my Democrat colleagues can at least agree on. I now recognize DOGE is working with agencies to reduce the rampant fraud. The GAO says costs taxpayers as much as $500 billion annually. To enhance fraud detection, agencies are now providing the Treasury Department more information about financial awards, and they are making more use of Treasury's Do Not Pay database to avoid funding fraudsters. DOGE is also lowering the barriers that prevent agencies from sharing data to identify duplicate awardees. What's more, DOGE has pioneered what the President calls radical transparency concerning wasteful spending. The DOGE website and individual federal agency sites continually update for public view the specific grants, contracts, leases, and other payments that they are flagging for termination. This is how you change the culture of spending. And with that, I yield to Ranking Member Stansbury for her opening statement.
Billions of dollars each year to fraud and waste.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the DOGE Subcommittee. Notwithstanding the abject failure of the DOGE enterprise inside the federal government and the epic breakup of Elon Musk and Donald Trump, here we are again, once again, in this committee. I'm grateful that the chairwoman showed, again, one of my favorite videos, which she showed on the first day of the subcommittee. I'm grateful because it highlights the work that we've been doing for decades to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, including work that I was intimately involved in as a budget examiner in the Office of Management and Budget, in which we actually eliminated waste, fraud, and abuse. But unfortunately, as my friends across the aisle in the GOP and their Heritage Foundation witnesses are still trying to make DOGE happen yet again, the American people are over it. In fact, you don't have to take my word for it. A poll from just 2 weeks ago found that 67% of voters believe DOGE has done a bad job. That was just 2 weeks ago. And in fact, when I told one of my friends that we were having another DOGE subcommittee hearing, they asked, really, is that still happening? Because literally the American people are over it. Except for that it's not funny, because DOGE has been used to wage a chaotic, destructive, and ideological war against the American people and the vital programs that they depend on. So I'm going to turn to that in just a moment here. Given everything that's happening in the world right now and with this administration, I don't think we can sit here and pretend like everything is normal, because just 4 days ago, the president launched an unauthorized military attack in Iran without the consent of Congress, putting our troops and our bases in harm's way, as we saw just last night with the retaliatory bombing of one of our largest bases. And Madam Chair, I have actually been extremely grateful and wholeheartedly agree with your outspoken advocacy against this war. But like so many in this administration, so many days and weeks, this follows weeks of chaos here at home. As the President has deployed U.S. Marines and National Guard on our own soil against our own people, his DHS Secretary and federal officials shoved a U.S. Senator to the ground, DOJ indicted a sitting Congresswoman in this House for doing her job, and tried to arrest a New York City official in federal courthouse. This is not only not normal, it is dangerous, it is anti-American, and it is anti-democratic. And so we're not going to sit here today and pretend like what this administration is doing is normal. And we're not going to sit here and pretend like DOGE is just some normal government program. It is a scam in service of a political agenda. Well, we came to the table at the beginning of this whole process in good faith with real ideas, bipartisan ideas that folks have been working on for years, and a desire to actually fix and modernize the federal government. What we've seen from DOGE is the exact opposite. It has so failed in its stated mission of saving money that even the President asked if it was bullshit as Elon Musk was exiting the building. And if they want to talk about fiscal responsibility, while they're sitting here, they're still trying to pass a reconciliation bill across the aisle that would saddle taxpayers with $2.5 trillion in deficit spending. And in the last few weeks, reports have revealed that DOGE may actually have cost the federal government more than it actually saved because of the mass firings, dismantled agencies, stolen data, lawsuits, agencies in chaos, agencies that are not able to do their basic operational duties. This is not efficiency. This is a scam. And that's not even to mention the completely reckless and needless suffering that DOGE is causing. We're talking about millions of children and people across the planet who no longer will have access to food and medicine because of the very $9 billion decision package that was just discussed. Thousands of veterans and public service members, servants here at home, whose lives have been shattered, and millions of Americans have been impacted by the gutting of vital programs, including staffing at Social Security. And now they're here today to try to make the case for making it permanent. Are you serious? Really, are you serious? I can't even believe my ears. So why are they actually trying to make DOGE permanent? But I think you have to look no further than the witnesses that we've told over the last several hearings, including today about the Heritage Foundation and other authors of Inefficiency and Project 2025. And so we have to be real about what this is actually about. It's not about efficiency, it's about a political agenda, an ideological agenda, about remaking the U.S. government, about remaking our economy and our society in line with a hyper-conservative worldview that is so unpopular that even Donald Trump tried to distance himself from Project 2025 during the campaign. And now he's hired over 70 officials to try to enact it, and now they're trying to use this committee to make their case. Now, they like to try to claim that they're taking on cancel culture and a woke agenda, but let's be clear, DOGE and folks who want to make it permanent are the actual cancel culture. Because they want to cancel anything that they don't like or they don't agree with, including your democratic rights and your freedoms, economic opportunity and education, LGBTQ plus rights, rolling back the clock on civil rights, canceling the history of Black, Chicano, and Indigenous communities, and stripping protections from our families and the healthcare, housing, and food people depend on so that they can get more like to their friends. Additionally, so this is all part of a wider agenda that is now seeking to apply political fury against the government programs and services, including both federal employment and, yes, veteran services. Let me repeat that again. Even veterans benefits, they want to apply political purity tests to your VA benefits of consumers. Folks, this is not about efficiency. This is about eroding and privatizing our institutions, gutting programs to keep our people and our country safe. It's about rewriting history and remaking society that take us back decades, if not centuries, to reduce. In short, it's about making this country less free, less democratic, democratic, less prosperous, and frankly consolidating power under Trump and his allies who are becoming increasingly dangerous, ideological, and yes, autocratic. So we have to be clear-eyed about what is actually going on. Because this administration and its allies, if they are willing to arrest and indict elected officials who are just doing their jobs, including a U.S. senator and a U.S. congresswoman, what will they do if we let them get away with it? We cannot and we will not remain silent. We have to continue to speak up, to speak out, to continue to stay together.
Without objection, Representative Subramaniam of Virginia is waived on to the subcommittee for the purpose of questioning the witnesses at today's subcommittee hearing. I am pleased to introduce our witnesses today. Matthew Dickerson is the Director of Budget Policy at the Economic Policy Innovation Center. He is recognized as an expert on fiscal policy issues, including the budget, appropriations, and entitlement reform, and served as a senior policy advisor on the House Budget Committee. James Burton is a senior fellow on economic policy at the Heritage Foundation's Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies. He is widely regarded for his deep knowledge in issues such as entrepreneurship, financial privacy, tax matters, and regulatory and administrative law. Dan Lips is a senior fellow at the Foundations for American Innovation. He has more than 20 years of experience in public policy, including with the Senate government. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of focus on enhancing government efficiency. The DOGE website details much of senior advisor spending policy and it hits the brakes on, and it has an incredible list of top hits. Some of the spending is not pursuant to Rule 9, but it is funding actually genital mutilation for children, forcing the American taxpayers to pay for it. A $620,000 HHS grant. Do you solemnly swear or affirm Senate testimony adapting an LGBT truce in the whole truth and nothing but a program for transgender boys? Let the record show that the $1,000 from answer in the affirmative. Thank you, and you may take a seat. This is disgusting. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have a NIH grant, and they will afford console steroid therapy and cardiovascular risk statement in transgender. As a reminder, this is another absurd grant in front of you that was handed out. It is on, and the members, a $120,000 NIH grant for personalized 3D avatar 4 minutes developed for measurement of body perception. When the red light comes on, gender identity. Here's another absurd grant. We would ask that again, please wrap it up. Tell us the lie. I now recognize Mr. Dickerson. There's only 2 male and female. That's it. Something else that the American people should know about these radical extremist judges that are playing politics from the bench. The judge rules that this has to be protected. This is a HHS program for gender-affirming care and young people. Again, the only thing that affirms gender is the fact that there's only 2 sexes, male and female. The American people should never have to pay for that lie. In this video, in your testimony, you talk about so-called failures of DOGE in your opinion. But do you support the federal government funding HHS and NIH studies that promote the genital mutilation of children? Do you support forcing Americans to pay for genital mutilation of children? Yes or no, Ms. Lydia?
Thank you for your question.
We all agree that the government should work
on our current trajectory.
No, I asked you, do you support genital mutilation of children and the American people having to pay for it? That's a yes or no question.
I think government research is responsible for all sorts of actions.
So you do, so for the record, you do support the American people paying for top and bottom surgeries of children. And cutting off the breasts of young girls, teenage girls, and castrating teenage boys. You support the American people paying for that. I think government research is important. That's not research, that's the video. That's mutilating kids' bodies before they're old enough to vote, before they're old enough to join the military, before they're old enough to even be adults. That's what you're saying the American people should pay for. Just so you know, Ms. DeVito, and I'm very proud to announce that I have a bill called Protection from the Citizens Act. It will criminalize sex changes on children, and that bill will see a vote on the House floor, and I look forward to my Republican colleagues, and hopefully Democrats doesn't come to their senses voting yes for that bill because it's absolutely repulsive and disgusting, and America voted against that this last election.
Was to restrict the ability of the unilateral expenditure of funds.
Mr. Dickerson,
how
do we implement cuts and appropriations moving forward to prevent these agencies from ever being able to fund these studies that promote the mutilation of children's bodies ever again?
I think what you need to do is ensure those fighters are included in the appropriations bills and reducing the power to clarify to the agencies that this is even though they have never actually received authorization would multiply to about $1.8 trillion of savings of the 10-year budget they need, but that is only if Congress implements and continues American taxpayers going to those, and that's why it's so important and harmful.
Yeah, permanently, right? Thank you. Other egregious abuses of funds. A $10 million Department of Education grant to the Virginia Commonwealth University for faculty workshops on decolonizing the curriculum. A nearly $700,000 National Science Foundation grant to the University of Tennessee for Black and Latinx parents leading reform and advancing racial justice in elementary mathematics. A project that could provide a model for other communities and schools seeking to advance racial justice in mathematics and education. This is insane, absurd, and it's racist in itself. Math is math. A $500,000 EPA grant, green jobs, growing a new generation of environmental justice problem solvers. All of this stuff is far left ideology, and the American people should not be paying for it. It looks like my time's up. So with that, I'll yield to the ranking member.
The scope of authorized agency activities
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As we get started here, we would like to show a brief video.
To rescind unneeded, unobligated funds. And of course, one of the most important tools at Congress's disposal to achieve budgetary savings is through the reconciliation process. America's current fiscal trajectory is unsustainable, but it's not irreversible. DOGE has demonstrated that meaningful savings are in fact achievable by exercising its constitutional power of the purse, controlling appropriations, implementing workforce reforms, precision and reconciliation. Congress can lock in the DOGE cuts, safeguard taxpayers, and avert a fiscal crisis. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Burton for his opening statement. Mr. Burton, can you turn it? Thank you. And make sure when you talk, your microphone's close to your mouth.
Now, I want to start by describing what we just saw there. For any of the American people out there who have not seen this video yet, that is United States Senator Alex Padilla being handcuffed in a federal building after self-identifying as a United States Senator at a cabinet secretary's DHS public press conference.
Currently, the federal government
This
must
happened
assure
2
that it is
weeks
not
ago.
a good steward of the tax dollars taken from
2 days
hardworking
later,
Americans and is poorly
they
managed.
tried to arrest a New York City official in a
And
federal
DOGE
courthouse.
is an important part of
A few
making
days
that
after
change.
that,
Under President
there was
Clinton
a
in 2000,
politically
federal
motivated
spending fell to
assassination of a state
17.7%
legislator
of GDP, the
in
lowest
Minnesota.
level since 1966.
This
The federal
is
government
not
ran its last
normal.
surplus in fiscal year
This
2001,
is the
which
sign
began
of
during
an
President Clinton's
authoritarian
In FY
approach
25,
to
federal
governance
spending
that
is
is
expected to
threatening
be
our
about
democracy and our
23%
people.
of GDP. Thus,
So we can
the
sit here today and
share
debate
of
government
the
efficiency.
now
We can sit
consumed
here
the
and listen
economy
to lies
is
from both our
32%
colleagues
greater than
and
it
from
was under
witnesses
President Clinton.
about what has
The
been
budget
done by
deficit is expected to
former
be
and
6%
current
of GDP this
administrations.
fiscal year and
But
continue
what
at that
is
level for a
happening in
decade.
this country
The
right
federal
now
debt
is
is now
not normal.
$29 trillion and is expected to increase
What they
to
are trying to do
$52
through the
for
budget is
119%
not
of GDP
normal.
over the next
The
decade.
rescissions
And it's
package that
projected
they're
to
trying
reach
to
a
shove
crushing
down your throats right now with $9 billion in cuts is not normal.
At the final year
Some
of President
programs that
Reagan,
they're describing, they want to dismantle the United Nations. They want to defund NATO.
Clinton's term,
They want to
33%.
defund
Federal
programs
government
that
is on
keep
its
children fed
unsustainable
across
path.
the world.
The path
They're trying to defund programs that have
will
saved
lead to,
literally hundreds of thousands of lives of people
sustained suffering
in
among
countries
American
across
people,
the
economic
planet. And we just
dislocation,
heard here just a few moments ago say that they're not satisfied with what they've already done and the damages that they're already doing. They want to go after entitlement programs. That means more Social Security. That means Medicaid. That means they're going to come for your programs, the programs that are life-saving, that sustain people as they age, the life-saving programs that make it possible for people with disabilities to live with dignity in this country. They are coming for those programs. So we're not going to sit here and pretend like what's happening in this hearing is normal at a time when this administration is using DOGE to enact an ideological agenda against the American people while they're out there trying to arrest U.S. senators and members of Congress. Because this is not okay, and it should be more efficient. We all agree that we should cut waste. We all agree that there should be bipartisan pathways forward to make the government operate in a modern manner. But that's not what this enterprise is all about. This enterprise is about consolidating power and endangering the lives of people that they disagree with, including people who ask questions, doing their jobs in public settings. And if they will do that to a United States senator, what will they do to the rest of us? So we're not going to sit here today and normalize this behavior. We're just not. We're just not going to do that. And with that,
I strongly support law enforcement for protecting the Secretary of Homeland. I wouldn't recognize Senator Padilla if he walked in this room. I now recognize Mr. Timmons from South Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. $37 trillion in debt to abolish the entire federal government. The fact that this is a partisan issue and the fact that my colleagues from Seattle are not taking this seriously is really frustrating. It's really frustrating. We haven't even talked about Social Security, which goes into austerity measures. My constituents and your constituents all over this country will receive 21% less if we do not save Social Security. These are just facts. This is just math. So we have to do our job here. We have to do our job here. And some of the most important work DOGE has done in the last 6 months is just simply on increasing transparency. Their website shows the public, how taxpayer funds are actually being distributed and justified on a daily basis. The DOGE initiative has shown that enhanced payment tracking and upfront verification can eliminate billions in waste. And we must make these practices standard, not exceptional. Tens of billions of dollars are lost each year in programs across Medicaid, unemployment insurance, SNAP, housing assistance, and more. Those who do not realize there were 17 means-tested social safety nets that total more than $1.5 trillion in annual government spending. And a good portion of these are infrared payments. And it is simply due to lax grounded income verification process. So all these different social safety nets...
I now recognize Mr. Lips for his opening statement.
They require that you have an income threshold that you do not meet. And we tell the states that they have leeway in how to do that. But it's a backward framework and it's all antiquated. Certain states require base technology use other income documents to the IRS. It's just simply not enough. This is 2025. Technology can solve this problem. Earlier in my career, we should be leveraging all income sources in real time and continuously to verify eligibility for federal benefit programs. No more pay and chase. No more hiding testimony months later, and no more guesswork. The United States, shockingly, in the big use bill, the House proposal to simply require states to confirm eligibility twice a year instead of only once results in $11 billion in savings. What if we confirmed income eligibility in real time? That's why I introduced H.R. 1750 just on timely and accurate benefits act. That's more than HABS Act to require states to adopt enhanced income verification across their federal benefits. They give people benefits they deserve faster, and to stop payments to those who no longer qualify immediately. Another income verification is one example of a broader problem. Federal agencies are swimming in waste fraud, abuse, and redundancies. And thanks to DOGE, we now have a public-facing receipt of over $180 billion in federal government savings. From unnecessary grants to services to federal offices with no measurable outcomes, DOGE is shining a light on the insane bloat of our frivolous spending. Bringing this is critical work that must be done. We have $37 trillion in debt and a $1.8 trillion annual deficit. Our social safety nets will fail if we do not make appropriate changes to decades of bipartisan government reform efforts. The Reagan administration's Grace Commission, to the Clinton Gore National Performance Review, to President Obama's fiscal responsibility initiatives, including a 2009 executive order that initiated Treasury's do not pay system, represent history. It's important that this tradition, history of executive action to root out innovations, executive order issued by President Obama, President Trump's new do not pay government officials, Treasury Department, working to reduce federal spending to shrink the size of the federal increase verification, streamline controls over federal DOGE has already identified $118 million in savings seen and reduced regulatory burdens by eliminating over 1.7 million were reported annually over those past 15 years. The administration has also issued several executive orders asking for DOGE asking for the ability to share information, fraud, and improper payments ago, centralizing payment systems administration under the Treasury Department and modernizing information about deceased Americans with the Treasury Department. The executive branch cannot do this alone, cannot do that, which brings a lot more that can be done to share information using legislative and appropriations powers to implement last payment forms. There have been bills introduced officially and reduce waste, fraud, and to do that, bills should be published and be bipartisan ever. Members of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee and the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee we cannot continue to have a tradition of passing bipartisan government reform legislation. For example, bipartisan legislation has been enacted and introduced 70% of just Medicare is $140 billion annually. Key reforms will strengthen the Treasury Department all social safety systems that are being consistent with President Trump's executive orders have been included in recent bills sponsored by Democratic and Republican lawmakers. These reforms would serve as a good starting point for legislation.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Ms. Norton of Washington, D.C. for 5 minutes.
In my testimony, I discuss other opportunities for government reform legislation that could achieve substantial savings.
Federal workers are essential.
For example, GAO has identified more than 200 open recommendations for Congress and more than 5,000 open recommendations for federal agencies.
And in turn,
these are nonpartisan good government reforms. If addressed, the federal government could save hundreds of billions of dollars. More broadly, Congress should consider creating an annual legislative vehicle similar to the National Defense Authorization Act, which moves every year, focused specifically on government reform. This would ensure consistent legislative oversight and give the American people's representatives greater input into ongoing reforms to government operations. In closing, improving government efficiency should not be a partisan issue. It's a fiscal necessity. The 119th Congress has a historic opportunity to reduce waste, prevent fraud and misspending, and begin addressing our long-term fiscal challenges. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify public service questions.
So far,
I now recognize Ms. DeVito for her opening statement. Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansbury, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Emily DeVito, and I am the Senior Advisor for Economic Policy at Groundwork Collaborative, an economic think tank based in Washington, D.C. I've previously served as a policy advisor on the Treasury Department. American deserves a government that 4% of them, a government that makes their lives easier. By that standard, as you said, many of these workers have led to higher costs and more huge complexity. It has undermined major food and safe families that all while huge ambitious savings in a timely way that social security benefit checks go out. Americans are not impressed. So far, we've lost thousands of poll acres, stronger law approval of DOGE, and deep concerns about the haphazard and reserve cuts that DOGE are making across the federal government. Americans also believe, as do I, that the government can do more to deliver for workers and families. As the subcommittee considers the future of DOGE and improving government efficiency and affordability, I would like to highlight several ways DOGE has done the opposite. For young and probationary employees, make it harder and more expensive by the families in their process having to start out programs in which careers into public service. DOGE is implemented by the Social Security Administration dedicated to making sure that the government critical monthly benefit of people, nearly 74 million hiring and probationary employees, 2 million retired ratio rely on talent from the workforce. New policies, such as restrictions on updating bank account information by phone, that force seniors to collectively spend over 1 million hours annually on unnecessary travel, just to receive benefits. Staff workers increase the risk of system outages, and beneficiaries face longer wait times and the quarter service at understaffed field offices. The Department of Veterans Affairs, which serves in $9 million annually, has also seen interrupted service.
How does
The impact of DOGE firings and buyout initiatives has been devastating. One rural Illinois hospital was forced to close its acute care unit due to nurse hesitation. Orlando area veterans faced backlog of over 2,000 unread radiology exams. And over 1,000 veterans in Pennsylvania were denied treatment for life-threatening diseases like workers. Behind the scenes, additional awards have been cut of degrading consumer protection government are coming forward to bad leaders. Manner that best serves the consumer financial protection bureau. You've got the federal workers $20 billion back to undermine the resources program consumers and the federal government. Eliminating any consumer protection politicizing certain able exploited companies undermines the overall profit at the expense of consumers. So you see a lot of also got the IRS for things like able workers corporations who are their fair share. Trained as of early March, the IRS has lost 11% of its workforce. They are 31% of the population not one particular person or administration to reduce U.S. revenue of $350 billion over 10 years. Further, the federal science enterprise is being stripped of the tools and talent needed to develop and deliver the next generation of life-saving treatments. Recent estimates suggest that DOGE's severe cuts to scientific research funding will reduce GDP and overall federal revenues well into the future by inhibiting innovation. Permanently cutting non-defense research and development funding by 50% could decrease GDP in the long run by at least 70% and federal revenues by more than 8%. Finally, DOGE's funding disruptions to U.S. aid and global health programs have already caused widespread deaths. Estimates suggest that the abrupt termination of federal health programs will be responsible for over 360,000 deaths, including 200,000 children. DOGE did not generate $2 trillion in efficiencies that Elon Musk initially called for, or even the $180 billion figure that other financial regulators will analysis or that cancel contracts for service cut they keep the economy stable, they keep our financial system safe and secure, $13 billion benefit total federal spending actually increased year over year. Now that Musk has made the gentlelady's time has expired, I now recognize Mr. Wilson from Missouri for 5 minutes. Congress is at a crossroads. We can learn from DOGE's mistakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here today. I, like everyone, my constituents, are fed up with watching Washington squander their money on frivolous programs and bloated bureaucracies.
I encourage leaders in Congress to put this
The Department of Government Efficiency was the most exciting thing. When I went back home and talked to constituents about it, it's the most exciting.
I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions.
And look,
The DOGE website details much of the wasteful spending and it hits the brakes on, and it has an incredible list of top hits. Some of the spending is not just embarrassing, but it is funding actually the genital mutilation of our children, forcing the American taxpayers to pay for it. A $620,000 HHS grant for hashtag transcendent health, adapting an LGBT plus inclusive teen prevention program for transgender boys. $620,000 from HHS.
They will only deliver what they
This is disgusting,
want, right?
and it facilitates a lot.
There's a reason why
Here's another
Congress,
a $2,000 NIH grant for cross-sex steroid therapy and cardiovascular risk in transgender females. This is another absurd grant that was handed out. A $120,000 NIH grant for personalized 3D avatar tool development for measurement of body perception across gender identities. Here's another absurd grant that, again, tells a lie that there's more than two genders. There's only two, male and female. That's it. Something else that the American people should know about these radical extremist judges that are playing politics from the bench. The judge ruled that this has to be protected. This is a HHS program for gender affirming care in young people. Again, the only thing that affirms gender is the fact that there's only two sexes, male and female. And the American people should never have to pay for that lie. Ms. DeVito, in your testimony, you talk about so-called failures of DOGE in your opinion. But do you support the federal government funding HHS and NIH studies to promote the genital mutilation of children? Do you support forcing Americans to pay for genital mutilation of children? Yes or no, Ms. DeVito?
Thank you for your question. We all agree that
Part of the problem, I think, with, no, I asked you, do you support genital mutilation of children and the American people having to pay for it? That's a yes or no.
I don't think government research is responsible for all sorts of innovations that we
do. So, for the record, you do support the American people paying for top and bottom surgeries of children. Cutting off the breast of young girls, teenage girls, and castrating teenage boys. You support the American people paying for that.
I think government research is incredibly important.
That's not research on this video. That's mutilating kids' bodies before they're old enough to vote, before they're old enough to join the military, before they're old enough to even be adults. That's what you're saying the American people should pay for. Just so you know, Ms. DeVito, and I'm very proud to announce that I have a bill called Protect Children's Innocence Act that will criminalize sex changes on children, and that bill will see a vote on the House floor, and I look forward to my Republican colleagues and hopefully Democrats to come to their senses voting yes for that bill, because it's absolutely repulsive and disgusting, and America voted against that in this past election.
Congress needs to legislate at some level. It sort of has forgotten.
Mr. Dickerson, how do we implement cuts and appropriations moving forward to prevent these agencies from ever being able to fund these studies to promote the mutilation of children's bodies ever again?
I think what you need to do is ensure those writers are included in the appropriation bills that are passed to clarify to agencies that even though they have never actually received authorization for these, so they shouldn't have actually done it in the first place. I think one of the most basic things you need is exactly what you're doing, writer to restore the one big beautiful American reconciliation for going to those kids, which is reform our divisive welfare programs that
permanently, right? Thank you. Other egregious abuses of funds. A $10 million Department